Welcome back everyone to part 8 of our interaction system series. And in this part, we're going to be doing two things. First is create a brand new interaction type, which is tap X times to interact. And second is we're going to dynamically get to the interaction location so that each actor defines their own location where to interact, meaning where to show the widget and where to rotate the player when we interact. And if you've been watching the series so far, you might have heard me ask in the last part to do some pre-work before watching this video, which is to think how you would implement the tap X times to interact on your own before watching this video. So if you have done that, now you can watch the video, compare your implementation with mine, and leave a comment below and tell me how you did, and if your implementation was different. I'd love to discuss it and hear your thoughts. All right, now let's get started. All right, so the first thing we need to do to add a new interaction type is define the name of that type in our enum. So let's open up our enum here, interaction type, and we only have two, press and hold. So we're going to add a new one and we're going to call it tap. All right, now we have a defined type for tap. But then every interactable can define how many times they have to be tapped. Maybe you have to tap the shield 5 times, the sword 1 time, the door 4 times, just like we have the hold duration here is 2 seconds, the hold duration here is 1 second, and so on. So just like we did the hold duration, we're going to also add it a function in our interactable interface. And we're going to call this function getTapCount. That returns how many times you have to tap the interactable if the interaction type is tap. So this will return the count, or let's call it value as well, and it's going to be an integer because it's a whole number, of course. Now you have to make sure that if you change the interaction type to tap, then this shouldn't be 0, otherwise it's going to break. So make sure this has a value. And let's do it for our door. So I'm going to open our BP door. And right now we have our interaction type set to, or was it? It's set to press. So this is all doors are press. We're going to make it tap. And then this means all doors are tap. Of course, if you recall, this is not a variable. So that means it applies for everything in the class, as opposed to the pickup item where we had this as a variable. So each instance can define its own interaction type. By changing it here. This can be hold, this can be press, and so on. But anyway, we're going to keep the door like this, and we're going to implement the interaction, the tap count, and let's return the number 4. So the door needs to be tapped 4 times. All right. So now, if we go there, first you'll notice something strange, is that it says E to open the door. There is no press or hold. That's because we didn't define what text should be added here. So the first thing we need to do is open up our widget, so our interaction widget. And this is going to be a very simple change because, as you can see, we already have tap here asking us what the text should be. Because this does a switch statement, a select statement, sorry, on the interaction type. So all we have to do here is just write the word tap, and then this will just work. Tap E to interact. Great. Now, of course, this won't do anything. Now I'm pressing E and it's not going to work. That's because we need to implement what happens when the type is tap. And that's back in our player interaction component here. So now you'll see that in the interaction begin, which happens as soon as the interaction is started, well, the input started, we have something that happens on press, something that happens on hold, but nothing that happens on tap. So we need to implement this part now. But before, let me just clean this up slightly. Let's just move this whole thing down here. Move all of this down here. And this one, instead of connecting directly to here, we can do something a bit cleaner and pull off and say create event. And then just select the event with the same signature, interaction ongoing. And we can rename this slightly, so interaction hold ongoing, so that we know that this is for the hold. And we're going to create a new one and call it interaction press. And this is what we'll implement now. So, oh, sorry, not press, tap, interaction tap. And then over here, if the type is tap, we just call our interaction tap. So now what we need to do is keep track of which tap we're currently on. So the item needs to be tapped 4 times, but how many times have we tapped already? Well, to do that, we're going to add a variable and call it the current tap count. And it's going to be an integer as well. So how many times have we been tapping? And this will default to 0. All right, so the implementation of this is not very difficult. First thing, let's just play a sound when we interact, just so that the player knows that something has been tapped. I think there's this gizmo handle clicked. Yeah, that's a simple sound. And then we're going to get the current tap count, this variable that we implemented, and we're just going to increment. So increment means add 1 to it. So it was 0, now we've tapped once. And then we want to get our active interactable and check how many times do we need to tap. So we're going to get the tap count. Remember, this is the interface function we just created. So this value should be greater than 0. If for any reason this value is not greater than 0, so if this value is less than or equal 0, let's do a branch. This shouldn't be the case, but if for any case this is, we're going to call the interact with active interactable right away. So just if it's less than 0 or 0, interact right away. But if it's not, then we want to get the how many times have we tapped out of how many times we should tap. So the ratio of tapped to tap count. So if the door tells us we have to tap 4 times and we've tapped twice, so we're halfway there. And we want to update the progress bar in our widgets with like half full. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get our interaction widgets ref here. I'm going to copy and paste this. And the percentage is going to be the current tap count divided by the tap count from the active interactable. That is going to be our percentage. So this is going to be a float, so I'm going to right click and change it to a float. And then we want to check, do another branch and check. Did the current tap count reach the expected tap count? So we're going to check if the current tap count is greater than or equal. Again, this current tap count we get from our interactable. Let me also clean this up a bit. Yeah, that's better. So if this condition is true, then we've reached the end. So then again, proceed to interact with active interactable. And then at the end, we want to reset the current tap count to 0 and do a few things, but I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to show you in a bit, but let's just see how this looks like for now. So if I go to my door now and interact, I'm going to tap. And you see it went up to a quarter, which is correct, but then it went back to 0. Now if I tap again, it's at half, now it's at 75, and now it's at full. But why does it go back to 0 after every tap? The reason is this part here. We always reset the progress percentage of our widget to 0 when we stop pressing our interact button. We did this because of the hold functionality. We want, when we stop holding, to reset to 0. But this doesn't work with tap because we don't want to reset to 0 when we stop tapping. So we're going to have to update this. I'm going to delete this part here. But let me remind you of the hold problem, why we added this in the first place. So if I go to interact with a hold item, I press and hold, and then I stop holding, this should go back to 0, but it didn't, right? Because now I stopped holding and the progress bar is still at its current position. Now, if I start again, it's going to start from 0, of course. And if I go away and come back, it's also going to be gone. But while I'm here and I stop holding, we need to fix this part. So we're going to fix this by using another event dispatcher. And let me explain. First, I'm going to create an event dispatcher and call it on interaction ended. All right. And I'm just going to call it here. So once we stop pressing the button, we're just going to dispatch an event on interaction ended. Now, the way this works is that the button doesn't care what happens when the interaction ends. The button just fires an event saying, hey, the interaction has ended. Now, if the interaction type is tap, we don't care that the interaction is ended. We've already done everything we need to do. But if the interaction type is hold, then we do care. That means that we're going to bind to this event only when the interaction type is hold. So just like we do here, we're going to add a new bind. So bind to interaction ended. And here, what we're going to do is create a custom event. And let's call it reset widget progress. And then we're going to get our interaction widget ref, make sure that it's valid, and then set the progress to 0. And that's it. And then afterwards, also, we need to unbind from this event. Unbind from interaction ended. Because we don't care if it fires again until we bind to it again. So now if I go to my hold, and I hold and let go, now it's working. But if I go to my door, I hold and let go, nothing will happen. It won't reset to 0 because the event that resets it to 0 is not bound to anything. And again, this is the perfect use case for event dispatchers. One part of your code just fires an event and doesn't make an assumption on who listens to it. And at a very specific part of your code, you listen to that event and handle it only in that case. Whereas in other cases, you don't need to handle that event. And this gives you separation of concerns and modularity within your class. All right. Now, the final thing we need to handle is once I've tapped to open the door, now if I tap again, it's going to open instantly. That's because we never reset the tap count. The tap count is probably like 10 now or something, and it only requires 4 to open. So we need to reset the tap count in 2 scenarios. Well, we need to reset it when we're done interacting. So once we've interacted with the item, we need to reset it. But we also need to reset it when we get out of range. So now I can tap 3 times and then leave and come back. And then the 4th will be complete right away. And that's because we don't reset it when the active interactable exits our range. If you recall, we did this also in the last part here. When the active interactable exits the range, we check, well, was it the active interactable that just left our capsule? And if so, then unbind from the interaction press ongoing. So we need to do the same thing to reset the interaction count. So to do that, I'm just going to create a nice function that does this for us, because we're going to call this function multiple places. So I'm going to call this function reset interaction state. All right, and then this function will do a few things. It's going to do, well, first it's going to do what we're doing here. So this unbind from the interaction press ongoing. So I'm just going to copy it. And it's also going to get our current tap count and set it to 0. All right, for now, that's all it needs to do. And we are going to call it here. So under this condition, let's call reset interaction state. And we are going to call it also here when we interact at the very end. Let's call it reset interaction state as well. Now let's test it out. I go here, I tap, I tap, I tap, I leave, I come back, it resets, perfect, I interact, and it reset as well. And for the hold, let's test it out. I hold, I leave, I come back, and I need to hold all over again. Excellent. And for press, we don't need to do anything. Nice. And that's implementing a new interaction type for tap. Now you can extend the system however you want. You can add a new interaction type by adding it to the enum. You go to the interaction component, handle the function here in the switch statement, and everything else should work just as we did for the 3 previous types as well. All right, one other thing I want to do to make the system a bit more flexible is to have each interactable define a location to interact with. For example, when the door opens now, the widget is still displayed like floating over here. It should be displayed on the doorknob. And the reason it's displayed here is because this is where the root of the actor is. And also for the NPC, the root of the actor is also in a very unfortunate location, which makes this an intimate interaction. So let's update that. Let's have each interactable define the location of the interaction itself. And as always, when we add something, when we define something on the interactable, when they have to tell us something, we always add it to the interface. So the interactable tells us what their type is, what their prompt is, how to interact with them. Well, it's no surprise that they will also tell us what the interaction location is. So we're gonna get a function called get interaction location. And this outputs a location vector. All right. And the way this is going to work is, let's go to our door, for example. Right here, we want the door to always return the location of the doorknob, regardless of whether the door is open or closed. And we don't want to keep track of where the doorknob is in the world. We don't know how to do that. I don't know where the doorknob is when it's like somewhere here. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach a component, and we're going to be a scene component. And a scene component is just a component that you can attach to other components to get its location in the world. So I'm going to call this the interaction location. And then I'm going to move this component, I'm going to move this component right to where I want it to be. Let's change this to world. Yeah, right here. So now this component is always attached to the doorknob. So if the door moves, the interaction location component is still attached to the doorknob. Excellent. That means that anytime I want to know where the interaction location is, I just need to return the location of the scene component. So let's go to our get interaction location function and implement it by getting our interaction location scene component and then getting world location. And that's pretty much it. All right, so how are we going to use this new function? Well, we're going to use it in two places. One is where we render the widgets, and two is where we rotate the player to face when they're interacting. So let's do the widget first. Over here, when we render the interaction widget, if you recall, we set the widget's location, and we set its location just to the location of the active interactable. Instead of doing this, we're just going to delete this, and we're going to get the interaction location, this new function that we created, and that's the location we're going to use. But there's something to note. If we don't want, well, this is an optional function. We don't want all actors to have to implement this location. Maybe the root location is fine for some actors. So before using it, we need to make sure that it's not 0. So what we're going to do is do a select here, a select vector. And we're going to be selecting between two things. Well, first we need to check, is this location returned by this function 0? I think there is a vector is 0. So if this is true, because if this function is not implemented, the vector will be 0. So if it is equal to 0, then use the active interactable's location. So get actor location. That's going to be our fallback. But if it's not 0, then use this location. All right, so now we can test it because we have multiple characters. This one doesn't implement the function, so it's defaulting to root. And this one does, so let's see when the door moves. Excellent, you see now the widget moved to the new location. Tap again. We have to go out and come back to re-render the widget, but that's fine. We can fix that later, but now it works. This defines where the interaction location is. But we're still rotating towards the wrong location. Look where I'm rotating now. Yeah, I'm rotating towards the old location. So let's also fix that part. Where we do our rotation right here. So we're going to do the same thing here as well. Let's actually create a function for it because if we're going to be using it multiple times. So what we did here, this whole check, getting the active interactable, its location, checking if it's 0, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to copy all of this and create a function and call it get active interactable location. And then pastes all of this here. And then we just need to return this location. Let's just call the return value location. right, and we can use it here instead of all of this stuff. Yeah, instead of all of this stuff, we can say get active interactable. Oh, get active interactable location, and then just use that location. Oh, it's also good to make sure this is valid first. So let's turn this, or check if is valid before using it. Always a good idea. All right, and then we can use it again in our event graph here. So this location, we are going to get the active interactable location. And also we can make it a pure function, so we don't need execution pins. Just make sure that this didn't, yeah, this still looks good. And then this should work. Let's see our door. I'm going to open it, rotate to the right location now. Nice. Excellent. Works as expected, so it always rotates to the doorknob. All right. And let's also change the location of this guy. So we go to our NPC, and we can do the same thing. Just as a reminder, we go to our viewport, go to our mesh, add a scene component, call it the interaction location. You can call it whatever you want. And let's display it somewhere here, for example. Yeah, that's more, yeah, that's more PG. And then go implement our function, get interaction location, which just returns the location of this component, get world location. And now, perfect, much better. All right. And that is it for part 8. I think I'm going to leave the interaction system in this state for now, and I believe I've taught you enough to know how to extend it and add your own functionality to it. For example, I've got requests for how to add different animations for different interactable actors. I think you know how to do that now as well. And I've also gotten requests to add a interaction cooldown, so you can't interact with the same actor multiple times in a row without waiting for a few seconds in between. And there is so much more we can keep adding to the system, like outlines around the interactable that's currently active, or adding a dot on the interactable that's not really within interaction range, but within visible range, so the player can see it from a distance and know there's something there to interact. A lot of games do that, and there's so much more. But again, I think I've taught you in this series everything you need to know to create these additions yourself. And if you are a Patreon member and you have a specific request for something to add to this system, let me know in the comments below or on Patreon. And if I get the same request from multiple patrons, then I will prioritize that and create a new tutorial. Maybe I'll do it a Patreon exclusive or something, or just release it for everyone. We'll see, depending on how complicated it is to make. And if you are not a Patreon member, check out the link on the screen to go to Patreon and see the benefits that I offer, like downloading the source code for all the tutorials I've ever made, early access to my latest videos, access to a personalized chatbot that will help you throughout your learning journey, and so much more. You will be supporting me so much just by visiting the link really and seeing what I offer and how much it costs, and if you don't like it, just leave, it's completely fine. And with that, I want to thank all of my existing patrons so much for supporting me. You make all of these videos possible, and I wouldn't be here without you. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.